Dad, we should increase production to meet export demands.
Let's review our logistic insurance needs.
We'll need more workers.
Okay, make sure they are fully covered.
Also, it's time to launch into e-commerce.
Great move, son. Let's prioritize cybersecurity.
Are you ready to grow your business? Talk to us at Chubb Insurance about protection crafted for your business needs. Not just insured, Chubb Insured. Visit chubb.com/my.
This is a download from BFM 89.9. The business station.
Good morning, 7:47 in the morning. I'm Khoo, joined by Sharidz, Abdullah and Lynn Mark. Now, Khazanah Research Institute has released a report on the housing sector in Malaysia, and the prognosis isn't particularly encouraging. They have noted that housing affordability has not improved significantly between 2002 and 2016, and the report suggests that house prices in this country are out of reach for most. Now, in light of the Khazanah Research Institute on home ownership, we've got a Twitter poll running, and they've basically asked Twitter readers, Twitterees, whether owning a home has become an unrealistic goal. The four options were yes, no, not yet, and why, buy when I can rent. We've had a deluge of replies as usual. 60% said yes, owning a home has become unrealistic. 15% said no, 15% said not yet, and only 10% said why buy when I can rent. You've got about 25 minutes or so left on this Twitter poll to register your interest, so tweet or hold your peace forever. Okay, now in terms of what we have now, to really respond on the report, we've got on the line Dr Carmelo Ferlito. He's a senior fellow at the Institute of Democracy and Economic Affairs, Ideas, to reflect on Khazanah's findings. Now, this report, Dr Ferlito, has touched on the need to differentiate between housing need and housing demand. Do you think this is something that the government has failed to recognize in the policy making?
Hello, good morning, first of all. Well, I think that if the government failed to recognize the difference between housing need and housing demand, this was in the right direction, in the sense that is an artificial differentiation. Demand is already the expression of needs as subjectively perceived by the people. To give you a simple example, if I go to a restaurant as an Italian, I order pasta. That is a demand that expresses my need. If we want to differentiate need from demand, I think that this is a very dangerous differentiation, assuming that someone else can decide what is my need beyond the demand that I'm expressing.
Now, Dr. Ferlito, what were the important takeaways from the Khazanah report for you that we should be focusing on?
I think that the report, I'm sorry to say, revealed, first of all, some important mistakes on methodology, and secondly, some ideological usage of data. An example, when in their main findings, they write that prices rose beyond affordability between 2012 and 2014. This is obvious because these ones were the years in which the boom in the housing market was stronger, and after that prices started to grow in a more moderate way. So we should look at data taking into account a wider perspective. Otherwise, I can tell you that between 1976 and 1982. The prices of housing in Malaysia rose of 18% per year, while salaries were growing only at 10%. So the situation 30 years ago was much worse than it is now. So we have to be very careful at the choice of data and the kind of emotions that we want to awaken in the public. The other big mistakes, I think, is on continuing using the median multiple as the way to measure affordability. And as I will discuss in a paper that will be released soon, I think that we should look at affordability from a wider perspective, taking into account three main elements, which are not only the price, but also the floor area and the location. So the affordability choice is always a trade-off between these three elements.
Now, the report states that the deterioration of housing affordability stems from the unresponsiveness of housing supply to effective demand. Now, in your view, how can this mismatch be fixed?
This can be true, and I agree on this. But I think that in order to identify the right solution, we should ask ourselves why housing supply was unresponsive toward a certain segment of the housing demand. And I believe that this was mainly because of a series of bottlenecks from the supply side, that impede the supply to be responsive. First of all, the high involvement of the government in the
Well, the doubling of house prices is also another issue, but let's discuss really the other issue, the flip side of affordability, which is wage growth and wage stagnation in Malaysia, as the case may be. Is that something that your good selves at Ideas are looking at specifically as well?
Price control?
No, wage growth and wage stagnation, as the case may be in Malaysia.
Well, if you look at data, we don't observe wage stagnation. Of course, there was in the past different behavior between inflation and salaries, but if you look at the data from the past 3-4 years, we are observing that salaries are actually marching on faster than the general inflation, and in the past 2 years, even faster than the housing price. So my prediction is that the affordability issue will be less an issue in the immediate future.
In your opinion, when does this inflection point happen between the ability to buy and the ability of your wage to match that desire?
Well, this is something that can't be said in general because yes, we have a percentage of increase, but this has to be applied to a variety of salaries. So this very much depends on the starting point of each individual and the kind of house that each individual want to buy. So surely we are observing now a catching up of salaries on an average, but to have a general discourse on when house will be affordable for everybody, I think is impossible and probably also meaningless.
Now, the lack of available data is also cited as one of the reasons causing the supply-demand mismatch in the housing market, particularly from state governments. Is a real-time database then a feasible solution?
I believe no. Well, for sure, the collection of data, as much as possible updated, will help the government to implement sound policies. However, we don't have to forget that the real data for sound actions in the plan arise dynamically and over time only in the market. So whatever data is collected in advance, in the moment in which a plan is implemented, is already an old data. And that's why the market solutions will be always superior to any kind of central planning, because they are based on dynamically evolving data. And this is the data that are important for entrepreneurial action.
All right, thank you so much. That was Dr. Carmelo Ferlito. He's a senior fellow at Ideas, which is the Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs. It is something, an issue that, will interest all Malaysians in terms of house prices and affordability. It's, I think, necessitates requisite discussion on whether home ownership is all that necessary. And really, it is also a discussion on economics, because the truth of the matter is, in any capitalistic economy, inflation and price inflation is a necessity. You can't have a developing economy with stagnant prices. And I think one discussion that was not really evident in the whole report is also wages and the stagnation of wages. If your salaries are rising faster than house prices, you can afford these homes.
There is a disproportion, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, so it was like we're talking about between that year of 2012 and 2014, there's an 18% increase in property prices in comparison to just about 10% of wage increases.
If you're lucky, that's why they call it increments, right? Salary increments. Increments are basically incremental in nature. On his discussion on wage growth, I think this is something that we have is kind of like flown below the radar. We have this notion that wages haven't grown very much, but in fact, even the EPF and I think Noor Hisham Hussain with Roshan Kanisan in their Reggae Sense discussion said that wages have been growing faster than inflation, and this is, I think, very much a reality, especially in the city. Maybe not necessarily in the small towns, but in the city for sure.
Then why the mismatch then between the actual data and the perception? Because the prevalent opinion seems to be that wage growth is not rising in tandem. Therefore, it says something about the fact that maybe Malaysians aren't feeling that growth in wages.
Well, because the wages have come off such a low base, it is still a multiple by a great deal
so
of your annual wages. We're playing catch up, essentially.
That's right. So, I mean, looking at, again, the disproportionate increase in property, for example, and also the wage. And, this is, in some ways, is alarming. I mean, we look at the figures back on how much property out there. We're talking about over close to 30 billion property that is unsold. And I mean, just recently we heard about the Home Expo that happened several weeks ago, and about 150 million, only 150 million were put on sale. And again, is the focus on the affordable homes, and only not. It wasn't that appealing, actually.
All right. It is now 7:58 in the morning. BFM 89.9.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9, the business station.